It's still the same old story, a fight for love and glory, a case of do or die. The world will always welcome lovers as time goes by.
The American Film Institute ranks Casablanca as the #2 movie of all time and calls it Hollywood's quintessential statement on true love. But what is it in the midst of all that nightclub, cigarette smoking, and 40s cocktail lounge drinking that makes this a statement on love? And better yet, what does it even mean to love? In the movie, Humphrey Bogart plays Rick Blaine, who appears to be the ideal bachelor and someone who lives entirely for himself.
I'd stick my neck out for nobody.
Bogart's character seems more likely to find himself in a string of one-night stands than to be a part of Hollywood's quintessential statement on true love. That is, until something, or rather someone, draws him out of himself. Rick's self-absorbed world is turned upside down when his former romance, Ilsa Lund, played by Ingrid Bergman, walks through the door of his club. The movie then flashes back to a scene of Ilsa and Rick in Paris before the war, in a happier time, enjoying life together and falling deeper and deeper in love with each other. The flashback ends with Rick receiving word that the German army is approaching Paris and him proposing to Ilsa and asking her to run away with him. They make plans to meet at the train station the next day, but Rick is left waiting in the rain alone until he receives a note from Ilsa telling him that she never wants to see him again. Rick is left crushed and gets on the train, never expecting to see Ilsa again. Rick is justifiably angry with Ilsa, but their attraction to one another is still evident. However, Ilsa reveals that she is married to a famous Czech nationalist named Viktor Laszlo, and she had been married to him during their time in Paris. She believed that he was dead, but found out he escaped from a concentration camp on the day that she and Rick were set to run off together. Ilsa finds herself torn in between each man to the point where she can't decide what to do. She tells Rick that she came in search of 2 letters of transit to escape with her husband to America, but that she wasn't sure she could leave Rick again. The movie ends with one of the most iconic scenes in cinematic history. Bogart and Bergman are standing on the runway of the airport, about to escape together to the United States, when Ilsa's husband appears, and Ilsa realizes that Rick is giving up his chance at another life so that she can be with her husband. And Rick, once again, walks away from the love of his life, fully expecting to never see her again. So why is this Hollywood's quintessential statement on love when the main man doesn't even get the main girl? Because love is willing the good of the other and then doing something about it. It's not an emotion, it's not an attitude, it's a move of the will to want the good of the other and then do something about it. If Bogart gets on that plane, then this is just another story of an immature, feel-good romance. But when he sacrifices his own happiness for the good of another, then Bogart makes a true statement on love. Now, the same year, while Humphrey Bogart was giving up his life for a concentration camp escapee and his wife on screen, a prisoner named Father Maximilian Kolbe was standing in line at Auschwitz, awaiting the decision of a Nazi commandant on what to do about a real concentration camp escapee. Auschwitz had a rule that if one prisoner escaped, then 10 prisoners are killed. They would be lined up, chosen at random, and put into a chamber until the escapee returned or they died of starvation. Father Kolbe and his fellow prisoners were acutely aware of this rule as they stood, awaiting the judgment of the Nazi commandant. Then the choosing began. One by one, the men were hauled off to the chamber until they arrived at one man named Franciszek Gajewniczek, who cried out that he had a wife and children. At that moment, Father Kolbe stepped forward and said, "I am a Polish priest. This man has a family. Let me go in his place." The commandant was stopped dead in his tracks. Never before at Auschwitz had something like this happened. And ordinarily, a prisoner stepping out of line to address an officer was shot. But this was allowed. Father Kolbe was then taken to the starvation chamber, where he was left to slowly die. As he was escorted to the chamber, Father Kolbe probably remembered an encounter he had as a child. He was praying alone one evening when he was approached by the Blessed Mother, who held 2 crowns before him. In one hand was a white crown of purity, and in the other hand was a red crown of martyrdom. She asked young Maximilian to choose one. He told her he wanted both. He had clearly lived a white crown life of purity, but it was now time for him to wear the red crown of martyrdom. Father Kolbe and the other 9 prisoners were left to wither away inside the cell as Kolbe did his best to encourage them and lead them in prayer. But after 2 weeks, he was the only one left alive, and there was no sign of the escaped prisoner returning. The Nazi commandant then made the decision to end Father Kolbe's life. As the guard came in to administer the poison, Father Kolbe, who had been in a state of prayer, merely stuck out his arm and received the syringe into his forearm, then slowly fell to the floor and breathed his last. Love is not an emotion. It's not an attitude. It's not a neurophysiological mechanism. It is not jealous. It is not pompous. It is not inflated. It is not rude. It does not seek its own interests. It is not quick-tempered. It does not brood over injury. It does not rejoice over wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love is patient. Love is kind. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things, and is willing the good of the other, and then doing something about it. It's a move of the will. If Bogart gets on that plane, then Casablanca is just another story of an immature romance. And if Father Kolbe watches that young Jewish father get dragged away, then his death is just another tragedy. But when they chose to sacrifice their happiness for the good of another, then we have a real statement on love.